couple of weeks after adopting Rayanne, Flordelis opened her door to find 37 homeless children asking for help, and her enormous family was born overnight.
Imagine adopting 55 children, building a multi-million-dollar church empire, and becoming one of Brazil's most influential politicians, only to end up in prison for masterminding the murder of your own husband, who was once your adopted son. This is the shocking true story of Flordelis dos Santos de Sousa. Today, we'll explore a case that stunned Brazil and captivated the world, involving fame, faith, family, financial greed, alleged poisoning attempts, and a brutal assassination that exposed a dark secret behind a respected public image: the Saint of the Favelas. To understand how this horrific crime happened, we have to go back to where it all began: the Jacarezinho favela in Rio de Janeiro. Born in 1961, Flordelis grew up surrounded by deep poverty and brutal gang violence. But in the late 1980s, as the Pentecostal movement swept through Brazil's poorest neighborhoods, Flordelis found her calling. Alongside her mother, she opened a small storefront church right in the bleeding heart of the favela. But Flordelis wasn't just preaching behind a pulpit. She was walking the dark, narrow alleys at 3 a.m., literally stepping between heavily armed gang members to pull young boys away from a life of crime. She became a local legend. She was fearless. She would look teenage gang bosses dead in the eye and tell them they were nothing compared to the power of God. And then came the event that cemented her status as a living saint. In 1994, a horrific massacre occurred in Rio, leaving dozens of street children homeless and running for their lives. That night, a 33-year-old Flordelis opened her small home and took in 37 children all at once. She didn't have the money, she didn't have the space, but she had the will. The Brazilian media fell in love with her. She was hailed as the mother of the nation. Eventually, her family grew to an astonishing 55 children. Only 4 were her biological kids. The rest were adopted or taken in off the streets. But hiding within this massive, seemingly blessed family was a bizarre, stomach-turning dynamic that the public had absolutely no clue about. The adopted son who became the husband. Back in the early 1990s, when Flordelis was cementing her status as the savior of the favelas, a 14-year-old boy named Anderson do Carmo joined her ministry. He was smart, highly organized, and intensely devoted to Flordelis. Seeing his potential, Flordelis informally adopted him into the family. For years, Anderson grew up alongside her other biological and adopted children, calling her mother. But as Anderson entered his late teens, the relationship took a highly controversial, unsettling turn. Anderson stopped being just a son. He became Flordelis' lover. In 1998, when Anderson was 21 and Flordelis was 37, they officially tied the knot. Yes, you heard that correctly. She married the man she had taken in as a child. To make things even more complicated, before marrying Flordelis, Anderson had actually dated one of Flordelis' biological daughters, Simone. Despite the deeply unconventional and frankly disturbing nature of their origin story, the couple became an unstoppable power duo. Anderson wasn't just a husband, he was a brilliant business strategist. He took over the family's chaotic finances, organized Flordelis' music career, and helped her found a massive new denomination, the Evangelical Community Ministry of Flordelis, the multi-million-dollar empire and the crown of power. With Anderson steering the ship, Flordelis transitioned from a local favela preacher to a massive contemporary Christian gospel superstar. She signed major record deals, released platinum albums, and filled stadiums with thousands of screaming fans. Together, they built an empire of 9 massive megachurches across Rio de Janeiro. They were living the ultimate dream, wealthy, universally adored, and viewed by millions as the peak of Christian morality. But for Flordelis, fame and wealth weren't enough. She wanted real, raw political power. In 2018, Flordelis ran for Brazil's Federal Chamber of Deputies, their Congress. Riding the wave of an evangelical political movement, she pulled off a stunning victory. She didn't just win, she secured more votes than almost any other female candidate in Rio de Janeiro, aligning herself with the highest echelons of government. From the outside, The family looked flawless. They would appear on television talk shows, a glamorous, beautiful black couple, surrounded by dozens of well-behaved rescued children. They were a shining beacon of hope. But behind the high walls of their luxury mansion in Niteroi, the Holy Family was living a literal nightmare. The house of sects and secret swaps. The image of the selfless mother rescuing children from the streets was, in reality, a carefully manufactured lie. Inside the mansion, a toxic, cult-like hierarchy ruled supreme. First, the 55 children were not treated equally. Investigators later revealed that the mansion was split into distinct castes, a small elite group comprised of Flordelis' biological children and her very first favorites enjoyed air-conditioned rooms, high-quality food, and absolute freedom. The rest of the adopted children slept stacked on top of one another on thin mattresses in cramped, unventilated rooms, eating vastly inferior food. But the psychological horror went much deeper than favoritism. Rumors began to leak out of the mansion about strange late-night rituals. Witnesses later testified that Flordelis practiced a bizarre, heavily distorted form of religion behind closed doors. Even more shocking were the allegations of flesh swapping. Former residents of the house claimed that the mansion functioned almost like an upscale, secretive swingers club for the elite members of the family. Flordelis allegedly allocated certain rooms for sexual encounters among the older children, visitors, and even herself, claiming these acts were spiritually sanctioned. And at the center of all this growing chaos was Anderson do Carmo. As the years went on, Anderson grew strict. He strictly managed the millions of dollars flowing into the church empire and Flordelis' political campaign. He kept an iron grip on the family ledger, refusing to give extra money or preferential treatment to Flordelis' favorite biological children. He monitored their phone calls, restricted their spending, and demanded absolute order. To Flordelis and her inner circle, the boy she had rescued from the slums had transformed into an intolerable dictator. He was standing between them and the millions they believed they deserved. And Flordelis decided he had to go. 6 attempts and a deadly cocktail. Most people think of a hit as a sudden, impulsive act. But what makes this case so utterly terrifying is the sheer, cold-blooded persistence of the plot. Flordelis didn't just want Anderson dead, she wanted him to look like he died of natural causes so she could maintain her saintly image and inherit his fortune. Starting in 2018, right as she was securing her political seat, Anderson suddenly became mysteriously, violently ill. He was constantly rushing to the hospital with agonizing stomach pains, severe nausea, and unexplained organ inflammation. Doctors were completely baffled. They ran tests, checked his blood, and put him on strict diets. But nothing seemed to work. Every time he returned home and drank a cup of coffee or ate a bowl of soup prepared by his loving family, the agony returned. What the doctors didn't know was that the family kitchen had turned into a chemical weapons lab. Under Flordelis' direct instructions, her biological daughter Simone and several of the favorite children were systematically lacing Anderson's food and drinks with arsenic and cyanide. They tried putting it in his coffee. They tried mixing it into his favorite local stews. They even put it in his medicine. But Anderson's body was incredibly resilient. Despite being poisoned at least 6 separate times, he somehow survived every single dose. He would lose weight, look pale as a ghost, and suffer immensely. But he just wouldn't die. By June 2019, Flordelis was running out of patience. The slow, quiet method had failed. It was time for something far more brutal. 36 bullets in the dark. On the night of June 15, 2019, Flordelis and Anderson went out for a rare night alone together. Ironically, rumors later surfaced that they spent part of their final evening at a local swingers club, trying to patch over the intense, unspoken malice building between them. They arrived back at their Niteroi mansion in the early hours of June 16th. Anderson parked the car in the garage. As they stepped out into the cool, dark night air, the silence was shattered by a hail of gunfire. It wasn't a warning shot. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was a close-range execution. A gunman stepped out of the shadows and opened fire on the pastor, pumping bullet after bullet directly into his body. When the smoke cleared, Anderson do Carmo lay dead in a massive pool of blood on his own garage floor. He had been shot an incredible 36 times, but it was the placement of the bullet wounds that sent a chill down the spines of the arriving detectives. This wasn't a standard gangland hit. While several bullets hit his torso and limbs, a massive cluster of entry wounds was localized directly in his groin area. In the world of criminal psychology, that is a highly symbolic signature. It indicates intense, deeply personal hatred, jealousy, or a punishment related to sexual deviance or control. Flordelis was completely hysterical when the police arrived. She threw herself over her husband's body, screaming and weeping for the cameras. She told the press and the investigators a heart-wrenching story. They had been followed home by ruthless thieves. Her brave, heroic husband had died defending his family from a horrific carjacking. For a brief moment, the public wept for the grieving widow. But Rio's homicide detectives weren't buying it for a single second. The intra-family criminal organization. When detectives began processing the crime scene, Flordelis' carjacking story instantly collapsed. First, absolutely nothing of value had been stolen. Anderson's expensive watch, his wallet full of cash, and their luxury vehicle were completely untouched. Second, the family mansion was equipped with a sophisticated security system. But, curiously, certain cameras had been turned off or repositioned just hours before the hit. But the real breakthrough came when detectives began interviewing the 55 children inside the house. Without Anderson there to enforce silence, the cracks in the holy facade broke wide open. The house transformed into an absolute viper's nest of mutual betrayal. Within 48 hours of the murder, police arrested two of the sons, Flavio dos Santos Rodriguez, who was Flordelis' 38-year-old biological son, and Lucas Cesar dos Santos de Souza, an 18-year-old adopted son. The pressure in the interrogation room was immense. Lucas cracked first. He admitted to the police that he had been approached weeks prior to help source a weapon. He pointed the finger directly at his biological brother, Flavio. Then, Flavio broke. In a chilling, blunt confession, Flavio admitted that he was the one who stood in the dark garage and pulled the trigger, emptying the entire magazine into his stepfather. But detectives knew these two young men didn't act alone. Why would they execute the man who funded their entire lifestyles? Lead investigator Alan Duarte began digging into the family's digital footprint, retrieving deleted text messages from WhatsApp. What they found was a goldmine of pure horror. The WhatsApp messages of death. As tech experts restored thousands of deleted messages from Flordelis' inner circle, the image of the weeping, heartbroken widow was completely obliterated. The messages proved that Flordelis wasn't a victim. She was the supreme commander, the intellectual architect of the entire assassination plot. In one highly incriminating text exchange, Flordelis wrote to her daughter Simone, openly complaining about Anderson's iron grip on their life and money. "What am I supposed to do? I can't just divorce him, because that would scandalize the name of God and destroy my ministry." Think about the twisted psychopathic logic of that statement for a second. In her mind, getting a divorce was an unholy sin that would ruin her career. But hiring her own children to brutally slaughter her husband in a garage was completely acceptable. The texts showed a literal family group chat dedicated to planning a murder. They openly discussed which poisons were working, how much dosage to add to his drinks, and when the best time would be to ambush him. One of the sons texted Flordelis, apologizing that the arsenic hadn't killed him yet, to which she essentially replied to keep trying. Another text from a granddaughter showed her actively looking for hitmen online and asking around the favelas for a clean, unregistered firearm. The police chief, Alan Duarte, didn't hold back when he spoke to the global media. He stated, "She is cold, calculating, and sly. I consider Flordelis a total psychopath. She created an intra-family criminal organization hidden behind a curtain of charity and holy devotion." In August 2020, prosecutors officially charged Flordelis and 10 of her children and grandchildren with aggravated murder, attempted murder, financial forgery, and armed criminal association. There was just one massive, infuriating problem. The police couldn't put handcuffs on her. The shield of immunity. Because Flordelis was an elected federal congresswoman, she enjoyed an incredibly powerful legal protection known as parliamentary immunity. Under Brazilian law, sitting members of Congress cannot be arrested or face criminal trial unless they are caught red-handed committing a violent crime, or if their fellow lawmakers formally vote to strip them of their title. Flordelis used this shield to its absolute limit. For an entire year, while her children sat in cold prison cells awaiting trial, Flordelis walked free. She continued to attend congressional hearings, wrap herself in expensive designer clothes, and preach at her remaining churches. When she had to attend court hearings, she would wear an electronic ankle monitor. But to hide it from the flashing cameras of the paparazzi, she wore stunning, floor-length silk dresses that completely covered her legs. She went on national television and threw her own children under the bus. She claimed that she had absolutely no idea they were planning to kill Anderson. She argued that her children loved her so much that they must have taken it upon themselves to eliminate Anderson to protect her from alleged emotional abuse. She painted herself as a poor, tragic mother, betrayed by the very kids she saved from the streets. But her fellow politicians had had enough. The public outrage in Brazil was a roaring fire. People were protesting in the streets, demanding justice for Pastor Anderson. In June 2021, the Ethics Council of Brazil finally took action. On August 11, 2021, the Chamber of Deputies gathered for a historic vote. By an overwhelming landslide of 437 votes to just 7, Flordelis dos Santos de Souza was stripped of her political mandate for a total breach of parliamentary decorum. Her shield was gone. She was now just an ordinary citizen. The arrest and the final verdict. Just 48 hours after losing her political immunity, on the evening of August 13, 2021, heavily armed Rio de Janeiro civil police units rolled up to her luxury mansion in Niterói. It was the exact same address where her husband had been executed 2 years prior. As detectives escorted her out of the front doors, a massive crowd of journalists and furious citizens surrounded the police cruisers. Flordelis looked into the flashing cameras, held up her hands, and dramatically screamed, "Faith in God." Just before her phone was confiscated, she posted a pre-recorded, tearful video to her millions of followers saying, "The day nobody wished for has arrived. I am being arrested for something I did not do. Pray for me." She was taken directly to the José Frederico Marques public jail in northern Rio, located right around the corner from the very favela where she had started her career as a humble street preacher. The mega trial finally kicked off in November 2022, inside a tense, packed courtroom on the 12th floor of the Rio de Janeiro Justice Building. Ironically, if you looked out the windows of that courtroom, you could see the massive statue of Christ the Redeemer looking down on the city. For 7 straight days, the jury listened to a mountain of horrific evidence. They heard the tearful testimonies of the adopted children who described the cult-like abuse inside the mansion. They saw the medical autopsies showing the traces of arsenic in Anderson's old tissue samples. They read the cold, uncensored WhatsApp messages where Flordelis ordered the hit. Flordelis's high-priced defense team tried everything. They claimed she was a victim of a misogynistic, racist political hit job by rival church leaders who wanted to steal her empire. They brought forward witnesses claiming Anderson was a financial tyrant who abused the family. But the evidence was an absolute mountain. The jury didn't buy a single word of her defense. On Sunday, November 13, 2022, the judge read the historic verdict. Flordelis dos Santos de Souza was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, attempted murder, use of forged documents, and armed criminal association. The sentence was absolute, 50 years and 28 days in prison. She was 61 years old. It was effectively a life sentence. Her biological daughter, Simone, was sentenced to over 31 years for her direct role in the poisoning attempts. Flavio, the son who pulled the trigger, had already been hit with a 33-year sentence, while Lucas, the son who bought the gun, received 7 years for cooperating with the police. Today, Flordelis sits inside a bleak, high-security women's correctional facility in Rio de Janeiro. The multi-million-dollar church empire has completely collapsed. The storefronts are abandoned or sold off. and the family of 55 children is completely shattered, scattered across the country, forever broken by a matriarch's psychopathic greed. It's a chilling reminder that the most dangerous monsters in this world rarely look like monsters. They don't hide in the dark alleys of the favelas. Sometimes, they hide behind a holy pulpit, holding a microphone, singing praises, and wearing the mask of a saint. What do you think about this wild case? Do you think a 50-year sentence was enough justice for Pastor Anderson? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I read every single one of them. Don't forget to leave a like. If this deep dive kept you hooked, share it with a fellow true crime lover, and hit subscribe so you never miss another story. Until next time, stay safe out there and keep your eyes wide open.